afternoon, listeners. Hope you've all been enjoying this beautiful autumn weather we've been having. Today on Angle, we're talking Alzheimer's, the leading cause of dementia worldwide. So you might know Alzheimer's as a disease just for the elderly. You probably even know of a family member who's currently living with it or has died from it. But it's not something you really need to worry about, is it? I mean, why would you? But what you maybe didn't know is that it's the sixth largest cause of death worldwide, or that it's responsible for more deaths than prostate and breast cancer combined, or that women are at the epicenter of Alzheimer's, almost twice as likely to develop the disease than men, or that by 2050, without a medical breakthrough, the number of Australians living with Alzheimer's could reach 900,000 people. Those are pretty shocking statistics, aren't they? But we're going to be talking about something a little different today, namely genetic predictive testing. So essentially it would allow you to find out if and when you're going to get the disease, possibly decades before it actually develops. Now, it's existed for Huntington's disease for almost 2 decades now, which, like Alzheimer's, is progressive, has no cure, and no effective treatment. So what we're asking you today, our listeners, is that if you could take a test tomorrow that would allow you to find out if and when you're going to develop Alzheimer's, would you want to know? We'll be talking to a couple of people on the topic. In the studio we have Alzheimer's expert Madeline Hunt, here to give you a bit of background on the topic. It's great to have you in today, Madeline.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Alison. It's a very interesting topic, and I hope everyone listening might learn something here today.
We'll also be talking to Moira, a 67-year-old from Melbourne who lost her job due to increasing memory issues and trouble performing at work. A trip to the doctor later confirmed a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. But let's start with you, Madeline. Tell us a little bit about genetic testing and what it could mean for people who are concerned about their risk.
Yeah, no worries, Alison. So for those listeners who don't know too much about Alzheimer's, it's very important to realise that dementia is not a normal part of getting older. And a lot of the symptoms are mistaken for just that, age-related concerns or manifestations of stress. Now, in the early stages of the disease, the most common symptom is having trouble remembering recent events or short-term memory loss. As the disease progresses, the sufferer begins to display confusion, aggression, irritability, trouble with language, and long-term memory loss. Now, as they decline even further, they may withdraw from their family, their friends, and society as they lose control of bodily functions.
Is there any way to slow that down? I'm aware there's no cure, but is there any way to keep the mind active and maybe minimise these symptoms?
Unfortunately not, no. The disease is progressive, which means symptoms gradually worsen over the course of the disease until death occurs, usually about 7 or so years after onset of the first symptoms.
Oh God, it's awful. But they're making some advancements, right?
Yeah, they are. So the genetics of what causes Alzheimer's disease is being dissected at a rate, in fact, faster than any other common disease, which is great, because identification of the cause is the first step to finding a treatment and the first step in developing a predictive test, the first of which has now been developed.
Yeah, I actually heard about that when they finally cracked how to do it. How does that work, though, exactly?
So it works through the identification of 10 chemicals in the blood, which are known to be associated with Alzheimer's, and the test has the potential to predict the disease decades in advance. It's a bit early to say how many people will want to have the test, but we already know from studies on predictive testing for Huntington's that there are a number of reasons having the test would be desirable. For example, planning for the future and achieving life goals before the predicted onset.
But it seems like the news that you're going to develop Alzheimer's would be a pretty big blow. Is there quite a large chance that people could become really depressed after hearing that?
Yeah, now that's a good question, and problems do sometimes arise when people aren't psychologically equipped to handle the news, which is why it is important that people who feel they would want to know take a psychological strength test to ensure they'd be mentally equipped to deal with the news that they'll develop Alzheimer's.
Thanks for that, Madeline. Really interesting stuff. We're going across to Moira now, who lost her job because of the memory problems that come with Alzheimer's. And you've been living with the disease for how long now, Moira?
It's been 2 years now. Yeah, 2 years.
Well, we'd all really love to hear a story. Do you think you could tell us about what your experience was?
Of course. Well, I had a job I really loved. Back in Melbourne, I was a computer systems analyst. And of course, I had to rely on my memory a lot, and that had never been a problem. But then I noticed I was starting to have some memory problems, and I compensated by taking lots of notes on everything I had to remember. That seemed to work for a while, but I had to keep taking more and more detailed notes and taking more time as my memory kept getting worse. It got really bad when our users started to complain that I wasn't getting back to them as quickly as I had before, and my answers weren't always immediate. A couple of them saw me referring to my cheat sheets that I used to keep. Unfortunately, the complaints were used as a grounds for my immediate dismissal. So after a while, my husband and I realized that my memory wasn't going to get any better. So I went to the doctor and I left with the diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And now I'm just reluctant to go places on my own, especially with my grandchildren, because I'm worried I'll forget them somewhere or just put them in danger somehow. And now the thought that my own children will probably have to look after me just breaks my heart. I'm supposed to take care of them. It's not supposed to be the other way around. I am happy that I get to spend so much more time with my husband, because he's just the light of my life. But it makes me sad that I won't be able to form any new memories with him. They just don't seem to stick. And I think as the baby boomer generation begins to age, the world will just have to confront the Alzheimer's problem because it's going to be impossible to ignore.
And Moira, what do you think about the creation of predictive testing for Alzheimer's? Do you think you would have had the test when you were younger if it was available?
Well, I think it's a great development. I think one of the scariest parts of Alzheimer's is that for so many people, they live with it for so long before they're diagnosed. They can't remember things that happened yesterday, and they don't know why. How scary that would be. If I'd known what was going to happen to me, I would have spent a lot more time with my family, and I wouldn't have worked so hard. I would have taken more risks, I think, too. Can't speak for my younger self, but I really hope that I would have been brave enough to do it. I definitely do. And I'd really encourage my children to have the test. I just hate the thought of them going through this. But I think that knowing that I was going to get Alzheimer's would have changed the way I live my life. It's too late for me to do that now, but it's not too late for my kids.
Wow, what a great insight, Moira. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's really been a pleasure. Unfortunately, I think we have to wrap up for the day, but I want to leave you all with a message. So, talking about Alzheimer's to other young people like myself, it seems like a lot of you don't really know why you should care. But you need to care. Because it's not something that just affects your grandma or your grandpa. Alzheimer's will change your family forever. It'll impact your parents, your aunts, uncles, your cousins. It'll change the way you define your family. And you know what? It'll probably change you a bit too.